Good evening and thank you. As has already been said, I'm here to talk about Civil War, heavy artillery and barrels and how to recognise and read them. Generally, when I'm in England, I look at the English Civil War, but since I came across it about 18 months ago, I turned my attention to the American Civil War. And as John mentioned, I've always had an interest in American Civil War, naval warfare. So looking at the heavy artillery while I was over here was something, something I wanted to do. Anyway, when I first met John and discussed this presentation, he said, Clive, you're not from the South, are you? and I said, yes, I am. I'm from Southern England.
There you go.
And then he said to me, he said, Clive, how long will this take? He said, I said, well, 2.5 hours. He said, 2.5 hours? He said, I want to go home early. Make it 2 hours. So this is a quick definition as to what I'm going to be speaking about and what I'm not going to be speaking about tonight. So I'm looking at Army and Navy artillery barrel capable of firing a projectile of 24 pound plus. That's my take on what is heavy. And the reason why I've chosen 24 pound, which I'll reveal a bit later on. And plus manufactured between 1816 and 1865 and used during the American Civil War. I keep saying American Civil War because when I'm at home, I have to define, I'm talking about the American Civil War, not the English Civil War. So, caveats and restrictions. Some gun details are missing or lost. Mortars, gun carriages, and ammunition are excluded. I'll just say almost, you'll see a little bit about ammunition. Cannons presented here have generally been chosen because I've physically seen them and photographed them. So if you see one missing, it's because I haven't seen it. The artillery pieces are presented in approximate day order. As you go through the slides, I'll tell you how many are surviving till today, but that number's always changing. Most of my data is 1997. So things have changed a little bit since then. Now you might say, well, so what? What we're going to learn tonight, what's the point of it all? Well, if you look at the threat is intent times by capability times by opportunity. So if you look at an example, which the quote below is from the attack on Fort Donelson on the 14th of February 1862. The threat to the Union gunboats was from the Confederates, obviously at Fort Donelson. The intent of the gunners was obviously to sink the ships. The capability is primarily the cannon, the ammunition and the efficiency of the gun crew, and the opportunity was cleared in coming up the Cumberland River. So it's very much, tonight, it's very much on that capability. What can a cannon do? So if you look at that quote below there, the fact is our boats, this is from the federal point of view, the fact is our boats, which were the city-class armoured gunboats, are proof against ordinary shot, even as large as a 64-pounder. But this trial, which is the 14th of February 62, has demonstrated the fact that rifled 30-pounders even will penetrate our iron sides, while 120-pounders nearly laughed at the obstruction. So you see down there on your left-hand side, they're all 32-pounders bouncing off the armour plating of the city-class gunboats. On the right is a Confederate Columbiad, 10-inch, 128-pounder. One of those was at Fort Donelson, firing at the gunboats. So from the point of view, A, you want to understand what the gun's capable of, but first of all, you want to be able to recognise it. You might, when you go to Fort Donelson or somewhere else, see the cannon there and want to know what that cannon is. Now, obviously, some places you go, some of the guns are replicas, some of the guns are original, but an original location. But if you can find an original cannon in its original location, and some are at Fort Donelson, then that's great news. The other bit of evidence there is that black and white contemporary photograph that was alleged to be taken at Fort McAllister in Georgia, and that's a Confederate Columbiad 128-pounder. So contemporary photographs are another source, another reason for identifying cannon. So it's in 3 parts tonight. First part's going to be smoothbore, second part will be Columbiads, and the third part will be rifled cannon. So, in the beginning, there's the War of 1812. America decided to declare war on us good Brits and the Canadians. During that war, the British raided up and down the coast of America, and they took Washington, burnt the White House, which obviously upset you Americans. So after the war, which ended about 1815, obviously had a review, and it was decided that there'd be more forts were needed to defend the coast, more warships were going to be needed to defend that same coast. And obviously more forts, more warships needs more cannon. At the time, the US had one foundry, which I believe was near Washington. Whether it survived the British attack or not, I don't know, but they were very dependent on foreign artillery. And another little piece there is the heaviest cannon they used during the War of 1812 was 32-pounder. So the first cannon we're looking at is a 6.41 inch 32-pounder smoothbore GI Navy gun, GI being gradual increase. I've always heard of GI Joe, but GI Navy, what is GI Joe? What's GI and GI Joe stand for?
Government issue.
Government issue. Well, this is gradual increase. Over 600 were cast between 1817 to 1827, and you can see the Bologna, Columbia, and West Point foundries. So you've got 3 foundries churning these guns out. So at one point you had 1 foundry. There's clearly at least 3 foundries working at this point. They're cast between 1817 and 1827. 600 is a large number for that time and place. Today, there are 19 survivors, 7 of which are upright, as in like memorials. Like I say, this date is from 1997. I've seen some additional cannon to that list, but that's an approximation, roughly 19 survivors. There are another 234 42-pounder. So remember earlier on, I said the heaviest cannon during the War of 1812 from the American side was 32. So here, you jumped up a level to 42-pounders. If you see a black and white photograph of a 42-pounder, you don't really know it, because the barrel length is exactly the same as a 32-pounder. It's obviously bigger bore, slightly thicker barrel, but if you're looking at a black and white contemporary photograph, unless you've got something really good to scale it against, you're never going to be able to tell the difference between a 32 and a 42-pounder. Of those 42-pounders, 4 survivors, 2 of which are bollards. So concentrating on the 32-pounder, this one's at Fort McAllister in Georgia. It's gun number 114, cast by the Bologna Foundry in 1821. Now, as I go through these slides, you see that white strip across the bottom. There's a whole load of technical data which I put in there. There's 2 in this one, because one covers a 32-pounder and you've got the other one is 42-pounder. If I went for all this data, we really would be for 2 hours. So I'm not going to. It's there in case you ask me an awkward question, or B, you can read it and ask me a question about it. So, okay, so how do you recognise the GI Navy gun? I always like to start the muzzle. This particular cannon, it's got muzzle swell. You can see the end of the muzzle there, it swells. I mean, it strikes me like a blunderbuss. You've got that exaggerated muzzle. It doesn't really serve any purpose. Ornamentation on cannon, believe it or not, weakens them. You think you've got a thicker bit of metal there, but because the varying cooling rates of the cast iron there, it causes planes of weakness. But that's by the by. The designers learned that as time went by. So you've got that muzzle swell, indication that even by the American Civil War, this is an old gun. Then you've got the chase band, another indication it's an old gun. On the front of the muzzle, there's no inscription. It varies. Some guns of different types do have inscription, but this particular type does not have an inscription on the muzzle. I forget, I'm losing my laser pointer here. So you can see there at the muzzle, there's no inscription on the front there. I always like to take my tape measure and measure, just in case the mark was wrong, to make sure that it's actually a 32-pounder, etc. If we look on the tube, you can see a little post there. That's the sight boss. And at the cascabel end, the back end of the cannon, you can see you've got 2 rings. You've got the base ring, which is quite an old feature, and you've got this first reinforced astragal and fillet ring. There's not many cannon that have these 2 rings, 1 ring at either side of the vent there. So that's quite a good recognition feature. And at the cascabel end, you've got what's called a ring knob. You have the ring there, and ring is traditional Navy. You put a rope through there to hold the gun in place, put the gun in place after you fired it. The knob is really Army. You put your hand there to traverse the cannon. This has got both, and that is, as far as I'm aware, the first cannon in the US to have a ring knob. If you look along the base ring, you can see an inscription. it says GI number 114. So it tells you, which is nice of it, tells you it is a gradual increase cannon, and it's the 114th cannon to be accepted into service. So if you look along that little white strip on the bottom there, you'll notice I've highlighted the 6.41 inch, which is the bore of the cannon, and along here you see the trunnion. The trunnion being this piece here. And that's got the same diameter, 6.41 inch. As I go through the smooth bores, you see I keep highlighting that because they nearly always match. So this is the same type of gun, the GI Navy gun, upright. It's a war memorial. So it's right at the bottom left is where you would have the inscription, but on this particular gun, it appears to be covered in the concrete. You've got the bands as before. You can see close up of the trunnions. The first cannon we saw on the previous slide was at my early days. I didn't take so many photographs. I didn't know what to look for quite as much. Now I take loads of photographs. And Usha will look at me and pull a funny face when I spend 10 minutes taking 20 or so photographs. But anyway, you can see the trunnion there unmarked. As we go through this presentation, you'll see the trunnion is very commonly marked with other types of cannon, but this one, the left trunnion and your right trunnion are blank. Now, when I visited Fort Donaldson and saw this cannon, it was marked 32 pounder, and that's what I normally say. 32 pounder doesn't actually tell you what type of cannon it is. I didn't realise at the time what type of cannon it was, but when I came home, I obviously worked it out. But the great thing is, I keep going about the trunnion size, it's sticking up in the air like that. I don't know whether it's 32 pounder or 42 pounder, but if I get my tape measure out and measure that trunnion width there, it's 6.41 inches, which matches the bore of the cannon. So I know it is a 32 pounder. Okay, as I go through this, you're more than welcome to ask me questions, but I'm also going to start asking some of you questions to make sure you're keeping awake and following what I'm doing. So this is a 6.4 inch 32 pounder smoothbore Seacoast M1829. As you can see across the top there, 1,222 were cast between 1828 to 1840. That's more than double the previous cannon, and obviously a very large number. You've got Bologna, Columbia, West Point and Fort Pitt foundries. You've got 4 foundries churning these guns out over that time. And today, well, let's keep saying in 1997 there are 49 survivors, so there's quite a few dotted around. This one again is at Fort Donaldson in Tennessee, gun position number 5, but it's not original to the fort. It weighs 7,541 pounds. This particular example cast by Bologna Foundry in 1833 and inspected by William Jenkins Worth. So just if we look at the muzzle there, has it got muzzle swell? Can you see muzzle swell or not? Yeah, good, great. Muzzle swell, indication of an old cannon, indication that this originally was a smoothbore. Can you see a ring knob here? Yep. Great. So there you got your ring knob at the back there. Same as the previous gun, but there's obviously clear similarities. So this is the Seacoast cannon broken down. So starting down here, we can see the muzzle swell, but there's no chase band. So obvious difference between this gun and the last gun, there's no chase band. The muzzle is inscripted, which is nice. I always think that the muzzle of the cannon is like the mouth, and he wants to tell you something, and this cannon's telling me something. It's telling me straight away, it's gun number 275. So of those 1,222 cast, this is the 275th. At the top there, it's got the inscription, WJW, William Jenkins Worth. Here's the guy who inspected it after it was cast, and he's the guy that says, yep, this is good enough for service. So if it fails, you can always go back to the guy who said, yeah, this is fine. And this scar here, it's not really a recognition feature, but I'm going to mention it because you see a lot of them. That's a Louis Walbach test scar. When all these cannons are being produced over this period of time, a lot of them are failing. They take them out to the range, proof test them, they blow apart. So this guy, Louis Walbach, he came up with this idea of testing the cannon to see what sort of quality they were after they'd been cast. So he went round, was it 1840? Yeah, he and his team did all pre-1840 cannon, well, nearly all of them, by 1847. So he drew out a 1.75 inch diameter piece of cast iron from the muzzle, and he tested it. I don't know what he did or even how effective it was, but he tested it, and he'd go to the knob at the back here, and he put a number in there, and he had 3 numbers: 1, 2, or 3. 1, basically first class, this cannon's fine. 2, could be better, but it's okay. And 3, not so good. It doesn't. So I don't know what happened. I don't know if it came number 3. You know, we take it out of line. I don't think I've never seen a number 3, but they're not marked very clearly. Well, yeah. I mean, if I was a gunner and I went to my cannon and saw number 3 at the back, I'd be thinking either A, volunteer for another gun crew, or reduce the powder charge. Yes, sir.
This may be something you're going to get to in a minute. If it is, you don't have to answer it. But what are the lifespans of these cannon if they're using 20, 30-year-old cannon by the time the Civil War breaks out?
Variable, and this is why this test scars are going on, because, and the thing I learned, every time you fire a cast iron cannon, it gets weaker. So you take it to proofing range, you might up the charge by 10% to give it that safety factor. Bang, off it goes, and it's fine. But that shot could blow apart. Cast iron is cheap. Bronze is a lot better. Bronze tends to bulge. So if you see the gun bulging, clearly it's an indication it's going to blow, so you stop firing it. A lot of field artillery is bronze, but it's very expensive. So all the bigger stuff is cast iron, which looks fine one moment, falls apart the next.
Did they keep any statistics on how many failed or injuries?
There's plenty of reports of them failing and injuries, and I'll give you an example. So if you look at the muzzle, that's that scar. You see it on a regular basis. These older cannons, that scar. And when I see that scar now, I always go to the back and try and find that number. It's not deeply imprinted into or engraved into the cannon, perhaps because they do want to highlight how bad a cannon was.
Is the government just too cheap to buy new artillery, or they want to get the most bang for their buck and not replace them unless they absolutely have to?
Well, and he also came up with the idea, and this has apparently been proven, that hot blast iron is inferior to cold. And I don't fully understand the process, but to do cold cast requires more fuel and therefore more expensive. So if the government gives you a contract for 100 cannon, you think, I'll do them hot blast because it's going to save me money. And there's a report that one guy said one of the government inspectors came around and they immediately went to doing cold blast, but when he was gone, went back to the old method. So it's all about money. Yeah. So
The government hasn't changed much.
no. So we look at this cannon here. It's got no sight boss. Remember the last cannon? It had a sight boss. This one hasn't. I put US inscription question mark. I put a question mark because I've seen plenty of these guns that have US inscription. When I visited this place, I didn't. I keep learning where to look for stuff. I didn't climb on top. I'm not supposed to climb on cannons anyway. I didn't check it to see if it had US. But big deal, US on the US cannon. It's not really a great recognition feature. We got this cannon that we already noticed. I think it doesn't have the first reinforced struggle on fillets. Remember, it had the other ring. The other cannon had a ring round here. This one doesn't have it, but it's got the base ring. It's got the ring knob, and I mentioned the weight before. That weight is inscribed underneath the knob there. Now I put weight question mark because once again, my early days, I was young and naive. I didn't photograph that part of the cannon. Like I said, Ruth will tell you, I'd go around photograph everything, and I use a flash because the flash picks up the detail a lot better, and then go home and enlarge it and try and see what's written there. And this marking's either been lost through corrosion, or if it's so many coats of paint over it, it's just been lost under the paint. Right, so we go to the right trunnion there. Like I say, the last gun, all the trunnions are blank, but most cannons do have something on the trunnions, and the M29 does. It tells you JC, John Clark. John Clark is the actual guy who actually cast the cannon. So you know this cannon, who inspected it, the WJW, and JC was the guy who actually cast the cannon. It's got BF, that's a Bologna foundry. So you know the guy who cast the cannon, you know which foundry cast it, and you look to the left trunnion, and I think you have to believe me on some of these, but it really does say 1833. So, when I say about reading cannon, all the information's on that cannon without looking at any of the paperwork. It's telling you a little bit of a story. And along the bottom there, you can see 6.4, 6.41 is the bore. And the trunnion, guess what? 6.41. So it's a different cannon, but the same type, same model. The Seacoast M29. This is the one at Fort Morgan. Fort Morgan, Alabama, cast by Pitt Foundry in 1833 and inspected by the WJW again. So look at the front, the muzzle, and you can see the Louis Wallback test scar there. Up the top there, I think you can just about make out a W. You know, what sort of worries me is I'm looking for marks now and knowing what should be there, and then trying to find something in the corrosion that looks like a W or J, etc. But when I blew it up, you can just about make it a W there, and that's where you expect to find it. And according to the records, he was the guy who inspected it, so that's where it should be anyway. And it should read gun number 116, but I can't see any trace on that muzzle of 116. Well, once again, it could be corrosion. It could be they never bothered putting it on there. Maybe each foundry marked the gun slightly differently, but I haven't got enough data to say that. I mean, it'd be great if I had, you know, all the cannon from a particular foundry and compared with all the cannon of a different foundry. It could be a one-off mistake or lost to corrosion. I don't know. It's a smooth bore. You can see a photograph there of the inside of the barrel, smooth bore. I've already mentioned the diameter of the trunnions. This one is definitely, I took a picture, a photograph of this one. It is a US mark cannon, as you'd expect. I actually looked for the weight of this one, so you can see under the knob there, there's this inscription here, and it says 7478. That tells you the weight of that cannon in pounds. I looked at the knob here, looking for the Wallback number, but I couldn't make anything out there. Maybe it's a number 3, and you just to make it too much of an indentation. Who knows? So left trunnion, got the year 1833. Right trunnion. I don't know what it stands for. So it stands for McClurg, Wade and Co., which is the early name for the Fort Pitt Foundry. So if you look on there, it actually does say Mac, W and Co. and on the top there, but underneath, presumably added later, it was a more up-to-date name, FPF, Fort Pitt Foundry. Okay, yet another picture of the M29. The reason why I'm showing you this, and I'll sort of skip around, is if you look at the bottom here, you'll see the number 141. If you remember, when the previous cannon we saw earlier on, it had the number down the bottom here. This time we've got the number at the top here. So once again, is that a different foundry producing the cannon? Is it a different method per foundry? I'm not sure. So we've got up here, JB, James Bankhead. So we've got, it's not the WJW anymore, different foundry, this guy's JB, James Bankhead. And it is cannon number 141, and that's all on the top of the muzzle. The Wallback scar is also something different, but that's totally independent of the foundry. That's somebody going along afterwards and doing a test scar. At the top left there, you can see where I put the ruler across to make sure that it's the right diameter, and it's 1.75 inch. Yeah, when I first saw these scars, I thought, is that a bit of canister around, or somebody's been shooting at the cannon? But it's not. They're all 1.75 because you use a 1.75 inch drill. Okay, so reason for showing you this one, you've got this one, you've got the number 2 at the back there. I don't know if you can make that out, but that's obviously second class the quality. But the main reason for showing you this slide is this trunnion. It's got a hole in it. It's a 3-inch test scar hole. In the early days, Mr. Wallback went round drilling 3-inch holes, and he drilled 3-inch holes in trunnions. For some reason, he decided it was a lot easier to drill a 1.75 inch drill hole in the muzzle. But the unusual thing about this cannon, for me anyway, is it's got both. He's obviously done the old method, the 3-inch method, either unhappy with it or I don't know, and then gone to the muzzle and done a more up-to-date method, 1.75 inch. But once again, when I first saw that, I thought, well, what's happened to this cannon? You know, I think there to see what had happened, but it is a test scar. I mean, what a test. There's a pretty big hole for a test, in my opinion. All right, so yet another photograph of the M29. I know you might be thinking, well, is it about time we moved on to a different cannon? Many cannons of the Civil War are modified, or they try to update them. So this cannon, M29, which is at Fort Gaines, has been, quote, updated. So it is still 6.4 inch in diameter, but it has been rifled. And because it's been rifled, the old 32 pounder projectile has been replaced with something at least 46, even up to 64 pounds. So this cannon, externally, looks like the same middle yellow cannon of the same series. You've got the date on there, 1832, and you see all that, you think, yeah, that's a smoothbore cannon, but this one isn't, it's been modified. The guns at Fort Gaines were rifled with 5 or 10 grooves. I don't know why the variation, but 5 or 10 grooves, and provided with new ammunition.
Hey, Clive,
Yep.
before you leave the smoothbore and go to rifles, how similar was that 32-pound cannon to the old Napoleonic ship-of-the-line 32-pounders?
Very similar.
Very similar.
In its original form, yeah.
Okay.
And you bring up a point there, one of the guys, I think it was Dahlgren, he says, what, another 32 pounder? Because they keep bringing out 32 pounders, churn them out, and then bring out another 32 pounder. And he's saying, well, why not just stick to the same model? Why bring out a different model, find the same projectile? I don't know what the answer was, but.
So the two were the same specifications, whether it was naval or sea coast, right?
It is, yeah. But strictly speaking, if it's pure naval, you just have the ring. If it was sea coast, you only have both. But like I say, I'm only going through the cannon that I've seen and photographed. So you get your books out, you say, oh yeah, you did mention that cannon. Well, I've not seen it to photograph it. So going back to this modified 1829, the rifling resulted in a change of projectile. Obviously that 32 pounder cannonball there is no longer going to do anything in the rifling. You've got to get something to engage that rifling to get the spin on the projectile. So yeah, so okay, let's start at the beginning. You take the cannon, you put your 5 or your 10 grooves into that barrel. Obviously by doing that, you're weakening that barrel. That cannon is now slightly weaker. You then take the 32 pound projectile there, and I've tried to do these photographs to scale, and you're replacing that with something like that. If you look on the right, that's a British import. These are 46 pounds designed to go in rifled 32 pounder smoothbore. So this is designed to go in this sort of seacoast gun. The Confederates themselves turned out these two. The one in the centre there is a shell weighing 60 pounds. That's again designed for the rifled 32 pounder. And these two projectiles are actually at Fort Gaines. So presumably they're the ones that were there for those guns. So you've got the cannon barrel, you put your 5 or your 10 grooves to rifle it. You then replace the 32 pound projectile with one weighing at least 46 pounds. And logically you think, well, if you want that projectile to fly at the same velocity, and you want that velocity because you want the projectile to be stable in flight, you're probably going to up the powder charge. And guess what happened? Bang! Yeah. So that illustration is from Fort Morgan. The gentleman on the right is Lieutenant Colonel Stewart. He led his troops at the First Battle of Bull Run. He fought at Shiloh in the Hornet's Nest, and he probably thought, great, I've got a post into the seaside down at Fort Morgan. So he goes down to the seaside, looks at the artillery in the fort, and decides to try out one of these new 32 pounder rifles. And they're always referred to as 32 pounder rifles, even though finding a projectile a lot heavier than 32. So they load it up, and they fire it, and it blows up. Every single man's either killed or injured. Colonel Stewart got a 200-pound piece of cast iron in the head, and also killed him. And I always find it a bit strange. They took his dentures out and sent them to his wife. And I said to my wife, I said, if I died, you want my dentures? But anyway, I slightly digress. It's reported in 2 local newspapers. I imagine some operational security, so I don't think what they're saying is quite right. What they generally say, oh, they loaded the cannon, forgot about it, and loaded it a second time. I find it hard to believe. Cannon are generally left unloaded because if you're by the sea, the powder can get damp. If you see an enemy warship come towards you, the last thing you want is your damp black powder behind your projectile, and it's the muzzle loader. It's very hard to unload, get some gunpowder down there. So I suspect that was a story sold to the paper, but in reality, it says double charge. Well, maybe it was. Maybe they did up the powder charge. The projectile weight, it's at least 50% heavier, if not double. So that's what happened. If you go to Fort Morgan today, there's a plaque there from his family commemorating the fact that he was killed on that spot with one of his guns. Now, you might see in the title there, M29 question mark. I don't know whether it was a Model 29. Even back then, they didn't say GI or Seacoast. It was just a 32 pounder. So this piece of cast iron is at Fort Morgan. It's in a case. If I had more time, I'd like to get it out and measure it up and all that sort of stuff. And it's reputed to be the 200-pound piece of cast iron that hit Colonel Stewart in the head. So if you look upon it here, it does look, you see the vent is a very similar, if not the same as the vent on the M29. There's a gap between the vent and the base ring. If I had a tape measure, I'd like to measure that to see if that matches that there. Now, going back to the fact that I said earlier on that when you put decoration on a cannon, it can make it weaker because the cooling rate varies. So logically, there would be a natural plane of weakness there where that thicker bit has taken longer to cool than the thinner piece of cast iron here. So a split along there is to a point logical. Anyway, so what I'm trying to say is you can see your 32 pounds, you look from the outside and say, yep, that's a 32 pounder Seacoast or even numerous other cannon. But if you look inside, you might find they're rifled, and that changes a lot of things. Other cannon that have been modified are banded, and I'll come on to banding a bit later on, but banding is reinforcing the rear end of the cannon, reinforcing the cascabel and the breech end. You might ask, why are there still 4 cannon at Fort Gaines? Why haven't they been blown apart? I don't know what happened to them. I imagine if I heard the news that 3 miles away in Fort Morgan from Fort Gaines, the cannon had exploded in their face and killed not only the team, but the commander of the garrison, you'd be thinking twice about firing a cannon at Fort Gaines. Right, so we're sticking with the Seacoast cannon. This is M1831, and this is a 42 pounder version. So this one, 167 casts over the period 1831 to 1840. You've got your 3 foundries there, Bologna, Columbia, and West Point foundries. There are 8 survivors today, 2 which are modified with rifling. So once again, this cannon could also be rifled. This one's at Fort Pulaski, Georgia, number 19. This was cast by the Columbia Foundry in 1836 and produced by WM, which is William Maynard Deere, for GDR, George Douglas Ramsey. And I put along the bottom there the 1829, just a comparison to the 1831.
Did you get to actually travel to Fort Morgan, Fort Gaines, and Fort Pulaski, and some other places like in person?
Yes.
I thought you did.
But if any of you are thinking about going, I'll send you a list of photographs I'd like you to take. Because every time I go, I come home and I think, oh, I didn't get that angle right, or I missed that. So, okay, so a little test here. If you look at the muzzle, has it got muzzle swell? Good. What's at the back here? What's this piece called? Greg, can you tell me? The ring knob. You can see the ring, and it's got a knob. You can't make up its mind whether it's Army or Navy. So this is one of those cannons I didn't take many photographs of. When I was at Fort Pulaski, I only had about an hour, and my camera broke down, and I was running around trying to take as many photographs as I could, and then I got told off for climbing on a cannon. Everything seemed to go wrong, but anyway. So we go look at this cannon. You can see, start here, the trunnion face is 7.018 inch, and guess what? The caliber is 7.018 inch. And I thought when I was seeing all this, I thought I'd discovered a rule, something special that had not been discovered before. But I'll break the news to you now. It doesn't always work. So to look at the muzzle, it's got muzzle swell, a smooth bore, no chase band, and there's no inscription on the muzzle. I say no inscription. I couldn't access the muzzle. I'll probably stuck my head out and had a look, but I can't remember how I got to the point there's no inscription. You've seen it on the M1829, so you would have thought you'd see it on the M1831s. Doesn't have a sight boss. It's got the base ring, the right trunnion with all the information. It's got JM and CF, which is John Mason, and the CF is the Columbia Foundry. On the left trunnion, it's got the year of casting, 1836. So okay, we're going to another gun now. This is the M1840, and I've got in brackets replica. I was always told, never rely on replicas, whatever. You see reenactors, you see stuff in museums that's copies. You always want to go to the original. But this one, there's 0 survivors. I don't know where they got details from. The drawings probably still survive, but you can't rely on the markings because, you know, maybe the originals had markings on the trunnions, etc. But there's no markings on this piece. So, but I've seen it, I photographed it. There aren't any other survivors, so I've included it. So there are 50 were cast, which is quite a small number compared to the other cannons we've been looking at. Just 50 cast between 1841 and 1843. But three foundries. Seems a lot of 3 foundries, 50 guns. And it says there's 2 examples at Fort Pulaski, which are replicas. And I keep saying about the rear end of cannon, the breech end of cannon. And the 2, we saw it on the GI gun, the 2 bands or 2 rings. This is another cannon with the 2 rings. This is the only other cannon I've seen with this sort of decoration. So the M1840 or the GI cannon tends to have that sort of decoration. And you can see this here, which is a knob. Clearly, it's not Navy, it's Army, or implied Army. So unfortunately I didn't take many photographs. As I said before, I was running around trying to snap as many things as quick as possible. So we've got the muzzle swell. There is a chase band, you can just see it there. It's not very clear in this one, but you can see the chase band there. In some ways it's like a step backwards, but chase band there. There's no inscription on the muzzle. It's got the base ring, which once again is a feature of an old type cannon. The knob, which is represents the Army. I've just been through the first reinforcing of straggle fillets. Left trunnion is blank. I say blank, I couldn't see anything on it. Maybe it was blank, maybe it's corrosion, whatever, I couldn't see. Once again, it's 6.4 inch caliber. The trunnion measures 6.4 inch. So this one's 6.4, 1 and 6.75 inch 32 pounder smoothbore, chambered cannon, 4100 weight, second pattern, modified. Quite a mouthful there. So 24 cast, not many, of the second pattern by Cyrus Alger and Co. for the sloop USS Saratoga in 1842. There are 3 survivors. So this example is at the National Civil War Naval Museum in Georgia, and originally it would have muzzle swell, but they're taking it off. It takes a lot of time and effort just to remove the muzzle swell. I imagine they would have moved the chamber. I'll come on to the chamber in a bit, but the chamber is at the breech end of the cannon, and it's a feature of old cannons, and then later on they tried to drill them out and improve their capability. And I should come on to that in a minute. So this particular example was captured by the CSA in 1861, but 2 of this type were placed on the CSS Chattahoochee. Did I pronounce that right? Chattahoochee? So 2 of these type of cannons, but I don't know whether the second pattern or the first pattern. So I mentioned about the chambered. Older cannon had a chamber at the breech, and this chamber was a tighter diameter than the bore. The theory was if you rammed your gunpowder down there, nice compact, in a confined space, you get more bang for your buck. You get a bit more velocity, save a bit of money. And then somebody presumably tested this theory out and decided, no, it doesn't work. So some cannon were modified by merely drilling out the chamber, so it's the same as the bore. So it's got that time effort, I thought, for a small gain. But this cannon we just see here, they may have done that. I assume they've done that because I think just take the muzzle swell away, it's a lot of time and effort for very little gain.
Wait,
Okay.
say that again. Why do you think they keep the flare out?
I don't know.
Okay.
I can't see any logical reason, because if there's any planes of weakness, that happens when you cast a cannon. So filing it off, if you like, isn't going to get rid of that planes of weakness.
Yeah.
It makes it look a bit more modern. But like I say, if you're going to put it on a lathe and go to all that effort, these things, they're not light. I can only assume they were boring out the chamber, and I thought, why are we boring out the chamber? Let's do the muzzle. I don't know. There's 2 of these at the Naval Museum, and both have been treated the same. So we start at the back end of the gun this time. It's got gusset drawers. These are naval. The ring knob, the ring has gone. We're looking at gusset drawers. On the base,
Line?
sorry?
Is that for a line to go through? Is that?
Yeah, you put a rope through there. So on the base ring, it's got 41,105. That's how it's inscribed, and that's the weight. That is 4,100 weight, 1/4 and 5 pounds. Now I assumed when I looked at this that it'd be using hundredweight as per the US, but it's not. It's British hundredweight. And the British used to have 100 pounds to 100 weight, quite logically, and then about 1300 and something, some king decided to change it to 112 pounds. I don't know why. But the US Navy decided to keep that and inscribe all their cannon in that method up to about 1850. It's a naval feature. So if you look at the top right there, it tells you it's 4,100 weight, 41 times 112. It's 1/4, which is 28 pounds, and 5 pounds. You add it all up, it's 4,625. A lot easier, in my opinion, just to put 4,625, but it's, say, that's a naval style at the time. We've got the base ring there, and it's marked Cyrus Alger and Co., which is the foundry that cast it. It's also been painting on there in white paint. I don't know in contemporary times they actually painted these things in nice white paint. It certainly helps me going along, see it all nicely highlighted like that. The muzzle, as I say, 6.75 and 6.41 inch. If you go at the actual muzzle itself, I put my tape measure, it's 6.75. If you go back a couple of inches, it narrows down to 6.41, which is what you expect for a 32 pounder. The right trunnion got a P, and once again, this is a naval thing. The Navy put a P to say the gun's been proofed. This gun's passed the test, and the year 1842. The left trunnion, it's quite corroded. I don't know, I think it should have been on there, but I couldn't see anything on there. And once again, we look at the bottom here. The muzzle 6.41, the bore rather 6.41, trunnion 6.41. Okay, so this is the Dahlgren shell gun of 9,200 pounds. The Dahlgrens are dubbed, as it says there, soda water bottles. So you can see the soda water bottle shape. And 1,201 were cast between 1855 to 1864. So they were produced before the Civil War, and they continued production into the Civil War. Cyrus Alger and Co., Bologna, Seifert McManus, which is one foundry, so that's the third foundry, Columbia, and Tredegar Ironworks, Fort Pitt, West Point foundries. So quite a few foundries there, all churning out these guns. Tredegar Ironworks is near Richmond. When the Civil War started, clearly they weren't producing these for the Union. Obviously, they're producing Confederate cannon, but like I say, they continued production into the war. 49 survivors. The one 852, we can see 852 there on the cannon, is not included in that list. So this is additional one to the list of 1997. This one is at the National Civil War Naval Museum, cast by Cyrus Alger and Co. in 1864, and was inspected by TAH, Timothy A. Hunt. So you can look at the muzzle again, you can see the muzzle swell, but you can see for the back end that soda water bottle shape. So I'll start with the bad news. The trunnion measures 7.2 inch. My theory is blown out the water. It's not all smooth bores bore diameter match the trunnions. Let's start then. So the trunnions, like I say, at 7.2 inch. There's no base ring. All the other cannons we looked at up until now had base rings. That's gone. It's a soda bottle type shape at the breech. It's got breeching jaws. The ring knobs, none of them. You've got the muzzle swell still, but you've got no chase band. It's got the P on the, which trunnion's that? On the left trunnion. P, it's been proofed. It's navy, it's proofed. And it's not painted in there, but it's TAH is under that. Timothy A. Hunt. He's the guy that proofed it. CA and Co. is Cyrus Alger and Co. at the breech. You can just see it there. gun number 852, and it's got the weight. Remember the last cannon was all in hundredweight, etc., really awkward. Well, Dahlgren's, he moved on and he decided to actually put it in pounds. So you haven't got to sit there and calculate it, 9,240 pounds. And on the right trunnion, you've got the calibre written in Roman numerals as in 9-inch, and the year it was cast 1864. Right, Columbiads. The Columbiads are a species of US seacoast cannon which combine certain qualities of the gun, howitzer and mortar. In other words, they are long chambered pieces capable of projecting solid shot and shells with heavy charges of powder at high angles of elevation. The Columbiads was invented by the late Colonel Bomford and used in the War of 1812 for firing solid shot. I quote this from the Ordnance of Gun of 1862 because wherever you look it up, the definition varies. But I thought, well, 1862 is the period we're looking at. I'll just take that and use that quotation. First one we're looking at is another replica. I saw this at Fort McAllister, realised the replica and stopped taking photographs. But I noticed in the visitor centre it said there were 3 10-inch Columbiads in the fort when it fell to General Sherman in 1865 or 1864. There are 3 Columbiads in there, and there was none there at the time of the visit, so I took some photographs of this replica, and you see I've got 3 question marks there because I couldn't find out what it's trying to replicate. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because it's wrong. It's really like a little warning. I went there, I got home, I looked at the 3 Columbiads and all the ins and outs of the 3 Columbiads, and all those red rings are where it matches up. The blue or mauve is where it fails. So if you look along there, you've got 4 matches and 2 fails. It should have a base ring if it's the old Columbiad of 1844, but this one hasn't got a base ring. So whichever cannon, so whichever Columbiad I lined it up with, doesn't match. So a proper Columbiad. This is a Confederate smoothbore Columbiad, 136 cast and bored as smoothbores by the Tredegar Ironworks. And remember, we mentioned Tredegar Ironworks and the Dahlgren cannon and the soda bottle shape. Well, I think they pinched that design and produced their own Confederate Columbiads. 17 survivors. This one's at Fort Donaldson. It's not the original one there. There were others. There was another one there in that gun position, but it is an original cannon. Can be bored out as rifles. So you've got 4 were cast as 6.4-inch MLRs and 2 were cast as 8-inch MLRs, muzzle-loading rifles. Right, no muzzle swell, no chase band, no inscription. It could be that the Confederates are just saying, let's get the cannon out quick as possible, or it could be moving with the times and saying, why are we wasting our time wasting cast iron, producing all this fancy stuff. There's no sight boss. The left trunion's blank. It is a 10-inch trunnion and it matches the bore, so back to that matching trunnion to bore. It has 8 breech base ratchets. I say that 8 because there's another cannon that has 9, and that's a recognition feature. If you look at the back end of this cannon, it's got 8. The Rodman, which you'll see a bit later on, has 9. The right trunnion has got TF, telling you it's from the Tredegar foundry. And if you look on the left-hand side, you can see the trunnion overlaps the gun carriage. That's because the guy who designed it for wooden gun carriages. When they put out the iron gun carriages, it didn't have to be so wide, so you got that overhang. I said to you just now that it could be cast in 6.41 inch. Well, this, so 6.4 inch, same as a 32 pounder. This is a 6.4 inch rifle, and this is at Mobile. This was originally at Fort Powell and in the Mobile Bay. You know, so say, spot the difference. At Fort Donaldson, one of the guys said, look, so the 6.4 inch rifle I had there and the 10-inch Columbia that I had there had come from the same mould. Well, he's almost right, it's the same model. But then, when you cast a cannon, you cast it solid, and afterwards you bore it out to whatever calibre you want it to be. And the theory was that the impurities tend to go towards the centre of the casting. So when you bore it out, you're taking out the bad cast iron, and you get a smoother finish and a more accurate finish. But these guns were designed as 10-inch smoothbores, but as I said, it was a couple cast and then bored out at 6.4 inch. The only difference I noted is that on the rifle, you got that sight post. On the smoothbore, you haven't. And whether it's a one-off, I don't know. But on the original drawings, it doesn't have a sight post. Sorry, sight boss. Sight boss is the right term. Another Confederate Columbiad, not known number, there's only one survivor, Fort Pulaski, and so it was cast in 1861. It's got a chase band. Why they've gone back to a chase band in 1861? No idea. It's got a modest muzzle swell. It's got the sight boss. It's got the trunnions with markings. You've got the JR8 and Co. TF. This is Joseph Reed and Anderson at the Tredegar Foundry. So it's telling you who's cast it and the foundry. The left trunnion is telling you the year of casting, 1861. It's gone back to the old knob, plain army, but it hasn't got a base ring. And you can see the muzzle, it was struck by a Union projectile during the siege of Fort Pulaski. That's hence the damage. And I know time's ticking on, so we'll speed up a little bit. So this is the Rodman, 1,291 plus cast by Fort Pitt, Safer and McManus and West Point foundries, Cyrus Alger and Co. in 1861 to 1867. Why they carried on casting them after the Civil War? No idea. Perhaps had a contract with the government and said, you know, you've contracted us for 1,300 and we're not going to stop. This was freeze cast iron, which is cooling the cannon from the inside. So these Rodmans were cast hollow. So like the other ones cast solid and bored out, these were cast hollow and they were cooled from the inside, which makes the cannon stronger. They tried the same process with rifle cannon, but it didn't work. But on these smoothbores, it was a success. So these are pretty strong cannon. This particular example is at Fort Clinch in Florida. Remember I said to you earlier on about the number of ratchets in the base of the Confederate Columbiad? We can see the ratchets in here. So you've got that rear view of the Columbiad there. You can count 8. This one on the Rodman, you can count 9. So as soon as you get a contemporary photograph, you think, is that a Confederate Columbiad or is that a Rodman? You can just count the number of ratchets and that'll tell you. Trunnion, once again 10 inch to make the bore. You've got the sight boss. I couldn't see any markings on this cannon. This cannon muzzle is different one to that one there. This was at the front. It's quite badly corroded. I believe they should have markings on the muzzle, but I didn't see any. Right, modified cannon. This is another 10-inch Rodman cannon, somewhat gaily painted. I don't know if it's an American thing. We tend to paint our cannons black, but you've got one out there. It's like a pride cannon. You've got the one on the right here is apparently the Garden cannon, and then when I visited it, it was in black. And when I read about this cannon, apparently the police arrested somebody for vandalising this cannon, spraying it black. Anyway, this cannon, it was sleeved. So they'd taken the old Rodman 10-inch smoothbore, they bored it out a bit more and sleeved it with an 8-inch rifled sleeve tube. So they're updating it. And you can see at the back end where the ratchet was, that's been replaced. Obviously they've done some work in the breech. So yes, it's a Civil War cannon. It's been modified, but it's been modified post-Civil War. It was done in 3 phases from 1876 to 1887. So yep, Civil War cannon modified post-Civil War. So into the rifle guns. A cannon which has certain spiral grooves cut into the surface of its bore for the purpose of communicating a rotary motion to a projectile around on an axis coincident with its flight. Once again, I got it from the Ordnance and Gunnery book, 1862. Why did I pick 24-pounder? Well, because there's a British cannon. I had to include it. This is a 24-pounder Blakely Siege muzzle-loading rifle. British manufactured, but never used by the British Armed Forces. It was sold into the Confederacy and it was sold into Russia, never used at home. Not no number cast, I don't know any idea how many cast, but there are 3 survivors in the USA. one here. You can see the second one there. So 2 of the 3 survivors in one photograph. This one was it Fawcett and Preston and Co. Liverpool, England 1861, and is original to the full. So it's got no muzzle swell, no chase band. It's looking quite modern. It's double banded, and I'll come on to banding a bit later on, but clearly they've reinforced the breech end of the cannon where the pressure's greatest. It's got no sight boss. It's got trunnions, 4.75 inch diameter. The left one's blank, and the right one has 86 on it. I don't know what 86 is, perhaps that's the gun number 86. These other markings are trophy markings. When it was captured by the Union forces, they took it and whacked some trophy markings on it. Parrot rifles. More Parrot rifles were cast in the Civil War than the entire Confederate output. So this one company produced more cannon than all the Confederates put together. Of this particular pattern, this is the second pattern of the 4.2 inch. 391 cast and accepted into service, and there are 198 survivors, plenty of survivors. This one's in Savannah, Tennessee, and was inspected by Richard Mason Hill. So features, you've got that banding. You can see a single band going around the back end, reinforcing the breech. There's no muzzle swell. This is second pattern. If you say, what's the difference between the first and second pattern? Well, the first pattern's got muzzle swell. The second pattern, they cast it without the muzzle swell. And what I like about this cannon is this. You know, I go to the muzzle end, the mouth of the cannon, and look what it's telling me. It's telling you 4205, which is the barrel weight in pounds. It's number 328, so that's the 328th cannon produced of that type. It's cast in 1864. West Point Foundry cast it. Caliber's 4.2 inches, and the guy who inspected it is RMH, Richard Mason Hill. You've got a rear sight piece here, and the foresight is here over the right trunnion. You'll see all the Parrots have a foresight over the right trunnion. Right trunnion RPP, which is Robert Parker Parrott, the guy who designed his cannons, and it tells you the weight of the projectile, 30 pounder. So another Parrott. This time we're going a bit bigger, 6.4 inch, 100 pounder. This is a Fort Morgan, 53 survivors. And we start at the back end, breeching jaws with a closed pin block. There's a pin that goes through there, and that closes that block. You can open that block up if you want to feed the rope in from a different position, rather than feed it through the ring. It's got a raw iron banding. All the Parrots have this single band. It's a feature of this cannon, the single band. The right trunnion, RPP, once again, Robert Parker Parrott. Left trunnion, engraved 100 pounder, so you know it's 100 pounder. And you've got the muzzle again, telling you what's all about it. Barrel weight, the number, year cast, foundry, caliber inches, and the guy who signed it off. And we look at yet another 100 pounder. Why another 100 pounder? Well, this is a Navy version. If you look on the data on the bottom, there's almost nothing to tell you that there's nothing that would distinguish one from the other, apart from the markings. There are 352 cast by West Point Foundry and accepted between 1861 to 65, 31 or 32 survivors. This was number 17, but as it says, this gun agrees with Army paper records. So it's got Navy markings, but on the paperwork, it's Army. But anyway, bit of confusion there. This gun was cast in 1862. So the first thing you notice is the muzzle has no inscription. So starting at the back end, you've got the breeching jaws, which you'd expect on a naval cannon. It's banded like it's in the other ones. It's got the pounds, not in hundredweight, but it's straight in pounds. But all this information is on the banding at the base of the band. Rather than on the muzzle, it's at the base of the band. RPP number 17, which is Robert Parker Parrott again, weight of the cannon. Inscription on the right, you've got the foresight there, sight boss, and you've got the 100 pounder there telling you what weight projectile, and the left trunnion, as you'd expect, it's got a P, foofed. then going bigger again, 200 pounder. And we're going back to the army. So you've got a single band, and you've got all the information on the front of the muzzle there. So it's a repeat because all the same styles, which is why I like the parrots. All that information on there, it's just knowing where to look for it. You've got the US on the barrel. Left trunnion, I put blank question mark. I couldn't see any markers on this particular gun. All the details on the muzzle, and on the right trunnion, sight boss, and inscribed RPP, as you'd expect. So we mentioned about banding. I mentioned about the modification of 32 pounder smoothbores. Other guns were banded. You modify the cannon and you reinforce the breech, and you use wrought iron, and you can see these bands. That's one band. These are all hoops. One band. And that's the second band. This is a Brook rifle, Confederate gun, but the banding is very similar to all guns of this period. So we've got a 6.4-inch Brook double banded rifle. One band, two bands, double banded. So 38 double banded cast by the Tredegar Ironworks again, and the Selma Naval Gun Foundry, and accepted between 1862 to 1863, of which there are 9 survivors. This particular one, S96, is at Jackson, Alabama. On the jaws at the back, it's actually marked S96, telling you which gun number it is. Left trunnion is inscribed 10,800 pounds, even though the marker next to it tells you it's 15,200 pounds. The cannon tells you itself 10,800. It's got a sight boss. I mentioned double banded. It's got the caliber in Roman numerals 7, and then it's got 0.4, 4 in Arabic numbers, 7.4-inch caliber, and it's inscribed by the guy who cast that cannon. No muzzle swell, no chase band. This is a modern cannon. Another Brook rifle, 7-inch. This is at Fort Morgan. These cannon took between 6 to 7 weeks to complete. When you see some of these Brook rifles, and you look inside, you find some are smoothbore. And I suspect they were casters rifles. Either A, the casting wasn't quite right, or perhaps the boring into a rifle didn't quite work out. Rather than waste 6 or 7 weeks worth of work, we just bored it out as a smoothbore. So whereas we saw the Columbia with the occasional one that's being rifled, but it's predominantly smoothbore, the Brook rifles are designed to be rifled. If something goes wrong, just bore it out, make it a smoothbore, send it to the front line. Rectangular breeching jaws with removable blocks. You can see the blocks being removed. In this particular one, it's missing. The left trunnion is inscribed 7-inch. That's the caliber of the piece in Roman numerals, and the pounds 14,800. On the front, all it tells you is the number S89. Right, that is the lathe at Auburn University in Alabama. It's apparently the only part left of the Brook rifle factory. This was when Selma was being attacked, they moved it towards Columbus. It never got to Columbus and was hidden away somewhere. It was then brought back into service as some factory and used up to about the 1930s, and has been preserved here at Auburn University. But I put it in there just to give some idea of the scale. You know, those cannons weigh 10,000, 11,000 pounds. You've got to get it onto that, bore it out. A lot of work, a lot of effort. Right, I'm building up a spreadsheet. I've got 118 heavy cannon on it at the moment. I keep finding more and more data and slowly but surely building it up. When I finish here in the US, hopefully I'm going to put it on the nooks and crannies on the website, well, not the website, in the on the site for the Huntsville Civil War Roundtable. Okay, that's me. If you see a strange Englishman going around with a ruler, measuring cannons and doing all strange things, taking lots of photographs, that's me looking after your cannon. And that's my pet hate. I hate that sign. I love climbing on cannons. I want to climb on top, see the US markings. I want to see the serial numbers. I want to see everything. So it's great.
I've got to ask a question.
Yeah.
Where is